Eyes on Fishing with Mitch Peterson, Josh Sheldon, and Brad Qualley, leading you to the next level.
Hey everybody, welcome back to All Eyes on Fishing. Tonight we're going to be talking about, because we've had this this topic come up from a lot of our listeners, emailing us and comments to us. We're going to be talking about leader length, leaders that you use for a multitude of things, and why we use leaders, how we run them. We've talked a little bit before on this, but how we run them a little bit different, but the importance of leaders. I mean, it's important. It really is a topic that I don't think a lot of guys think about, or they are because they're asking us questions about it.
Right. Well, before you go and hit stop, because this sounds lame, it's really not just leader length. It's leader material, whether or not you use a leader, what kind of leader you use. Do you use floral? Do you use mono?
Why do you use it?
Why do you use it? Do you use it ice fishing? Do you use it open water? Do you use it jigging? Do you use it trolling? You know,
We're going to talk about all that.
Everything leader
No, dude.
inclusive.
No.
Yeah.
This could be like 8 top podcasts.
Well, then we'll do a few.
Okay. Because there's no way we're getting all of that. You're just wrapping off a bunch of stuff.
Well, it's going to go into different
we got to
directions.
focus. So let's talk about, we have, I don't know, what we should talk about first, because you just rattled off a bunch.
Well, we could do jigging. Okay, so here's a good example. So when you go to jig, right, whether it be you're jigging through the ice or whether it be you're jigging in open water, okay, I use Fireline. I attach a leader to Fireline
How long?
all the time. Anywhere between 24 to 36 inches, depending on the application.
And what kind of leader?
Fluorocarbon, Trilene 100% professional grade fluorocarbon, and I will do, usually, if I'm jigging 8-pound test, I will match it at 8-pound fluoro.
Mitch has got a little different.
And I know Mitch will do it different.
At times.
Yeah.
I think vertical jig and I'll leave it the same.
Right.
I'm thinking slip bobbers.
Yeah,
Slip
yeah.
bobbers.
Slip bobbers,
That's
you do it
all.
different.
We'll get on that in a minute. So go ahead, Mitch.
Well,
He tries to cut you off.
And the reason I like to just match it is because, it would make sense too if you went to 6-pound. If, say, your main line was 8-pound and you went to 6-pound, well, that's going to work just the same.
Sure.
But I go with 8 and 8, match it up, or 10-8 Fireline with 8-pound fluorocarbon.
Sure. And what you use a leader for is as important as the leader itself. So I know we have talked about this amongst us and probably in a couple other podcasts, but the length of the leader that you use between the end of your lead core and your bait. I know I do less than what you guys do. I have seen other people, professionals that do a ton, right? They'll do 50, 100 feet, something like that. I do 10, 12 feet max.
We do 25.
You guys do 25. So, and I don't do floral, I do just, XT.
Well, that's what we do. I mean, we're going to be common on that. I mean, so we're going to use fluorocarbon for all of our leaders minus lead core. Then we're putting on 10-pound. I use that. We use that XL. Not you use XT.
I use XT.
Yeah.
And you don't use, and I don't use a leader on just my normal trolling rods with mono. I mean, there's no need for a leader on that. You just tie straight to the bait. But we do a lot of fishing around here through rocks and jagged rocks, or riprap or, so leader material usually is far more abrasive resistant than even your Fireline.
Well, and it's also it's fluorocarbon, so the refraction rate is
Right,
that of water.
right. And
Close to it.
Right, and so it holds up better against when you're jigging, if you're casting towards rocks or whatever. And then if we're not, 80% of the time we are, and if we're not, then it's casting towards some sort of wood, trees, some sort of something falling down in the water, something like that, right? So then it gets nicked up and beat up at the same time. So I think it's important to have that leader when I know you guys just tie Fireline straight to your jig most of the time.
A lot of times, if we're going out and we're set up just a vertical jig, we do. But a lot of times, like this last summer, we really focused on pitching and casting jigs.
And I mean, my
Yeah.
arms are still tired. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so,
It was. So no, we got I don't remember what tournament it was, but we pre-fished for 2 days before, and then we cast it all day, both days, and the regular day. By day 4 of fishing, I'm like, I gotta cast left hand. I can't switching my spinning rod to reel in with my other hand because my arms are just dying.
Well, let me
Anyway.
tell you, a lot of walleye guys, will bust chops on the bass guys because, bass will eat anything, right?
Right,
Easy
right.
to catch. Well, I'll tell you what, hey,
Cast all goddamn day.
yeah, I've got a whole new respect for these dudes.
I'm stretching my shoulder out right now, getting ready for next season.
We're gonna be ready for bass fishing next
Yeah,
year.
right, I know, but I mean, so that's kind of the point is, you guys did a lot of casting.
Lots.
And if you're casting a lot, chances are that's a lot of reaction type strikes, something like that. They're probably not gonna notice if you have fire line attached or not. I like to use.
That's why we used it, was for that, because we were fishing shallow. We were fishing very clear, 2-3 foot, and when we were fishing straight fire line,
Right.
we weren't having the success like we would normally vertical jigging 15, 25 feet down. But casting, we were putting on that 36-inch fluorocarbon Snell or leader
right.
to pitch up into the shallows, and it seemed to make all the difference.
Well, and that's fishing for you too. It seemed to make a difference, so guess what? It was making a
Yeah,
difference.
so
There's no
it was the
way
whole
we're
season.
gonna,
Right. We did that.
we're
Right.
not gonna switch it up.
Well, and I use the bright chartreuse fire line. I like the high vis fire line. I like to
you
be able
can't
to
see.
see it, or the tracer, as the guy who's wearing glasses says that too. But I like using the, I like to, but I like to, I like to have that, that little bit of leader before, but, and that goes into the whole thought process too. How spooky are these fish? We just read an interesting article in In-Fisherman about, are they that spooky? A lot of these guys, they'll put weights right down to the hook on live bait.
Well, I've thought about that before too, because we pull a lot of crawler harnesses, slow death rigs, things like
Sure.
that. And we always tie about a 36, 38. We don't measure it out. We've done so many. They always end up within a couple inches.
So,
So basically, when I'm ice fishing, a lot of times I'll put a slip bobber on my main line and not run a leader. It's pretty typical, but if it's clear, you bet a little 2-foot lead of fluorocarbon is going to be great.
Right.
But a lot of times I don't use a leader when I'm running a slip bobber ice fishing.
right, okay, so when I ice, not ice fish, I don't ice fish. When I fish open water slip bobber, I always run a leader. Usually it is a smaller diameter than what I'm using for my main line.
Sure.
I'll run it down to a swivel, a very small swivel.
The
and then-
teeny ones.
Yep, and then off of the swivel down to, whatever small, teeny tiny jig head I'm using to do a leachman or whatever. Or
Bear
chunky
hook.
crawler,
Bear
bear hook, yeah. So that's, I commonly will do that for two reasons. One is I want that leader to break, that hook, or between the hook and the swivel long before, if I get hung up, long before I break, the main line and lose my bobber and all the rest of the weights and everything else. So I don't want to have to rehook everything. I just want to tie on a new hook, new jig head, whatever I'm using, right? So that's the important piece for that.
It
So-
is important, and that's a great thing that you make.
And that's why it's really not a big deal ice fishing, because you're sitting right there. A lot of times we have our flasher too, so you can use that to set the depth.
Right.
A lot of people that don't have flashers, you're using a depth finder and stuff, but you're not getting hung up like you would open water fishing
Right.
with a slip bobber. Casting into areas you don't really know
Yeah.
what's there and
Right.
stuff. So
That is
fishing
the-
cover, yeah.
Yeah.
primarily difference.
Right, so that's a good thing for the leader, and when I talk leader material, it is 99% of the time fluorocarbon. I think that's the important piece. I see people ask all the time, and they've asked us, well, what do you guys use? Well, what kind do you use? Do you use this? Do you use that? That we have seen some junk. There has been some junk out there in the past.
We've probably tried about everything.
Yeah, and some of the stuff breaks off easy, and it's not as abrasion resistant as you're used to, and that may just be that certain type that they put out that year or whatever, but
Well, the thing with fluorocarbon, though, is it's super, it has a lot of problems with heat. So when you're tying that
Yes.
knot and you're going to tighten it down, it has to be wet.
It has to be.
And you can't just yank it quick. Take it, work it down
Yep.
on a wet knot, or
Yep.
else you're gonna have break-offs there, no, all the time.
well, yeah, it'll melt it and make it a weak point before you know it'll
You can't
snap.
see it, but-
And I notice the majority of the time when I tie a leader onto my jigging rods from Fireline to fluoro, when I finally do break off on a snag, knock on wood, I haven't broke off on many fish, but
You mean snag on wood? But bump.
That was stupid.
Short bus. But but I mean, if I do break, it is usually right at the knot, right? I mean, it's right at the knot.
It is.
It's the floral side of the knot.
That is something that Floral has problems with.
And
is
you combat it as much as you can by getting it wet and stuff, but I do think there's some sort of disintegration of the integrity of the line every time you tie it.
I think that's with mono too, though.
It could be,
I mean, a
yeah.
lot of times when you're just running straight mono, you're going to have that problem. A lot of times things break at the knot. I mean, that's why they do the knot wars testing, right? Because it doesn't break in the middle of the line, it breaks at the knot. And it's
Right.
because once you've introduced that to the line, it ends up breaking it down some or making it weaker.
Okay, so let's do length of leader, all right? I know we all have different ideas on some of this, but it also depends on where you're fishing. You're fishing in the Great Lakes, you're doing open water trolling where you have spinners on boards, and you're fanning them out across, and you're not necessarily worried about, getting nicked up on rocks, maybe some zebra mussels if you went towards the bottom, but not necessarily rock stuff like that, like we do here with the bottom bouncers. How long a leader do you tie, or do you have a general length that you tie your spinner rigs with?
3 to 4 feet.
All of them, 3 to 4?
Yeah, yeah.
I would say general, you asked general.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
If I'm gonna build spinner rigs to sit down and build them,
Yep.
yeah, they're all gonna be about 3
Okay,
feet.
so you're gonna troll inline weights or snap weights, open water, Great Lakes, Green Bay, what do you time?
Well, the Great Lakes, like when we're up there, it's so much clearer that we.
It is, but you're
Well,
doing
when
it
we
for
were
the
up in
distance.
Escanaba, we were
Right.
running 7-foot leads.
Right.
We made them.
Between 7 and 10.
Yeah, 7, I was gonna say 7, maybe a little longer
Yeah.
than that, but they were quite a long leads. Now, we were running snap weights or inline weights,
Right.
changes the game a little bit.
Right.
But for general all-purpose,
Right,
I think we're running about a 3 to 4 foot lead on all of our spinner rigs that we build. Same with our slow death builds, because we build those out, like if we're going to a tournament or out to the lake for the day.
Right.
And we know we're gonna be pulling slow death, we get one of those, those noodles that you have?
yeah, the styrofoam noodles.
Yeah, that the kids swim around with.
Yeah, the one that keeps you from drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a perfect.
I know, it's
Yeah.
perfect.
So we cut it off in like 2 foot, like a 2 foot section, right? And then we can build like 20,
Right.
25 of them,
Right.
and then just stow them so you have them ready to
Right.
go, so you're not on the water bouncing up and down tying.
Right. And a couple things to consider.
But
right?
that's about a 3-4 foot lead too.
Yeah,
That's
I-
just general.
Right, so a couple things to consider, and this is the way I look at it, and you guys can look at it differently or say something different, whatever. But the way I do it is I do everything at 4 feet. I estimate 4 feet. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, perfect. 4 and some change, because when you tie on the hooks, you're going to cut some off,
Yeah,
whatever.
that's why, yeah.
So I do 4 and some change, right? That is how I tie all of them to go to a bottom bouncer. Okay?
But remember, when we pull slow death, who's better at it?
No, listen. You
So
guys,
maybe you should be doing 3 to 4
No.
and not 4 and some change.
You can keep your slow down. So here's the.
But who's better at it? You haven't answered my question.
I have a great point here, and your lame-o question, your lame-o point. So listen, here's something to keep in mind. Here's something to keep in mind, and it's important before I lose my train of thought. A-hole is you do the longer leaders, right? If you're going to run, let's say, an inline sinker. I think that's the
Sure.
kind of the thought, right? Because it gives you some distance between the sinker and if you're going to do inline. Snap weights are different, right? Because you can run snap weight anywhere you want up and down that line to give yourself some distance. So if you're going to do 50 feet behind your board, you can do your 25 snap weight, 25, and you're good to go.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But
can
what
still
does
run that
matter-
4 foot snap.
Right, but what does matter, and the part I have noticed recently, especially if you're fishing weeds that are growing up towards the surface, is the further away from that bait that you have that mostly inline, because you don't want to run a snap weight through weeds or whatever.
You're just gonna lose them.
You want to run that inline. The further away you run it, the less control you have over how high that bait stays above the weeds.
Yeah.
So if you run it further back, it may flutter back there a little bit higher, right? It's almost like a downrigger, like it goes down and then the bait goes out and it maybe comes up a little bit as you move. But you don't know, right? You don't have that solid feel of, if you're running it 4 feet, 3 feet behind the board, we know that bad boy's 3-4 inches below the surface. And that's where those fish are sitting, in that water column between the top of the weeds and the surface. Well, if you have that weight all the way up and you're running 10 feet back,
You
and
can't
then the
do that.
weight and a couple feet in the board, you have no idea. It could be sinking down into the weeds.
Even if it's not sinking, it does whip a little bit.
And
I mean,
it
if you ever
moves.
watch it, you see it go, they pull straight when they're right next to your board.
Right.
Or right next to your boat. But when you see them out there, reeling them in even, and you let it, you stop reeling for whatever reason, you
They
watch
flop
it,
around.
it flops around a little bit.
Yeah.
It goes offline a little bit.
Yeah, and so I think that's an important thing to think about when you're tying leaders or figuring out what you're going to do is, even when I do inline weights, I keep it fairly close to the weight because I want that control. And if you're doing inline and they're coming up and hitting it, which is usually from underneath, right, coming up out of the weeds or
Yeah.
whatever, I don't think they see the weight. I don't think they care. I think they come up and they whack it from
Dude,
underneath and inhale it.
I think that in ultra clear water, like when we were up in Mille Lacs, or when we were really
Escanaba,
Escanaba,
yeah.
where it's
Yeah,
just
Mille Lacs is muddy.
It
But
is
Green
yeah, it
Bay-
was
Green
Green Bay.
Bay.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry, but it's so clear that even your boat seems to spook fish off.
It seems like it could, right?
It seems like a lot of it does. So you take advantage of whatever you can to try to make it as stealthy as possible. But I'm telling you, I think when you're running stained water, we do 3-4 feet because that's what we've done. We've experimented with different lengths before, but
Right.
I really think that if they're going to hit slow death, because that's what I'm talking about. If they're going to hit it at 3.5 feet behind that weight, they're going to hit it at 2.5. Really,
Sure,
right?
sure. I mean, I think they're going to hit it at maybe even 1.5.
You know what? I want to try that this year. I'm going to make some 6-inch slow death rigs.
Look at that baby go.
It's going to be right there.
But I mean, I really think that's something to consider because it's that time of year, right? Where if you're not sitting out on the ice and actually fishing, you're starting to prepare and you're maybe tying spinners, on a snowy Saturday. And,
You should be,
and
because-
yeah, I mean, you should be getting stuff swapped out from the year before and things like that. I think
Checking all the hooks.
Yeah, I think it's important. And for me personally, I go to 4 feet and that's it. I mean, and I don't pre-tie slow death. I tie that when I'm, using it around the boat unless it's a tournament situation where I know we're using that. I mean, that's the presentation, then I'll tie a few. But most times I do just the spinners. But 4 feet seems to be the good general number for bottom bouncers, for inline weights,
That's what
for
we talked
above
about.
cover.
I was joking around with the 6-inch thing, right? But I do agree with you that I do agree with you that I do. I mean, I know you're stuck on 4, but I think if you're in that 3 and 4 foot range,
Yeah, and I say 4, but it could be closer to 3.5. I mean, you just don't.
no, but
after you tie it.
But
and-
after fishing hundreds and hundreds of hours of pulling things like spinners or slow death,
spinning glows or
Whatever it is.
Smiley blades.
that it's going to be, we've really tried a bunch of different leads, and I'm telling you, I think it boils down to 2 things. I think we've had most success at normally 3 or 4 feet, right?
Right.
On general fishing, and when the water gets ultra clear, if you're not picking those fish up at 3 or 4 feet, try going longer.
A little bit longer, yeah.
So a little bit longer. So
Yeah.
I think
Well, one thing that's pretty easy too, if you're sitting around building stuff.
Right.
If you throw in that change like Junior does, for some change, hey, no problem. If you want to shorten it up, it's pretty easy.
it's a lot easier to cut it off.
That's right.
And
It's
you-
a lot easier to shorten it.
Right, and you can always, cut it off at the loop, retie the loop, put it on, and you're off and running. And so that's something to keep in mind. But I think the moral of the story is for leaders, in general, fluorocarbon, 100%
Definitely.
trilene, professional grade fluorocarbon. Don't put it on your reel. That's not what it's for. It's for tying leaders.
Don't try spinning it up.
Yeah.
Because it's got so much memory.
It'll be a disaster.
It'll jump off.
And use it ice fishing, right, Mitch?
Sure, you bet.
Use it open water, use it on bobbers, use them if you're going to tie to fire line. It's important to be versatile in knowing what the leader's for. There was a point when I was growing up, I never used a leader for anything, didn't even know what it was. It has seriously changed, especially with the invention of fire line.
It
So-
changes the game.
yeah.
So you had about 20 things you brought up, and we've only talked about a few. I told you we were going to run out of
But
time.
that's all right, because here's what we're going to do. It's going to give us podcasts for the next 3 months while you guys are out freezing your butt off on the ice, and I'm going to talk about
You're
real
going to be
fishing.
talking
That's
to
right.
yourself again. So hey, no, we're going to wrap this up. So everybody from All Eyes on Fishing, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter. Go to our webpage at All Eyes on Fishing at.
No ad.
There's
You
no
always
ad. I
say
did ad last time.
AllEyesOnFishing.com.
Oh,
And make
yeah.
sure you listen to us iTunes, Spotify, or any one of the big carriers we are on
Why do
now.
I always do the ad?
Because
You love it.
Yeah.
I love the ad.
You love being at something. I don't know.
So-
So, but we're all over on that, and like and and make sure you subscribe to these different pages, because then that gives us an idea of who's out there and what you guys want, and let's interact. Make sure you tell us what's going on. That's
Yeah,
how we
sh-
got
sh-
this idea.
Shoot us questions, any topics you'd like us to talk about. We love doing this, so we'd love to hear from you guys too.
Okay,
Got
so we're
it?
gonna wrap it up.
Do we take this part away from him after the last one?
No, it's all him.
All right, here we go. Here he goes. Get ready. Drum roll.
What
Do
is
it. Wrap it up. Let's hear it.
Thanks.
This has been All Eyes on Fishing. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next time, where we discuss all of your favorite fishing topics. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out our videos on YouTube, or read our blog at alleyesonfishing.com. All Eyes on Fishing, leading you to the next level.